Well, again, just CeCee and I are just blessed and honored that you're with us tonight. We look forward to spending some time as mission interpreters and storytellers to just think about stories and how we connect those stories to our hearers. But to begin, I just wanted to start with a little prayer. Hear these words. They're from a larger prayer that is in a book called The Rhythm of Prayer. And this one is by Reverend Emily Swan, but I'm just taking a small piece. So hear this. Spirit of Jesus, come with fire that refines, water that refreshes, wind that topples, and breath that fills. Let us stand for love and with love, following the way of your Son as best as we're able. Let us not fear an experiential spirituality, but let us listen to the wondrous bodies you gave us. Let us hear your voice and tangibly feel you with us. Let us discern your guidance. Let us abide in and with you. In Christ's holy and mighty name, amen.
Amen.
So again, thanks everybody for being here. Charlotte, it's so good to see you too. At this point, we're just going to let CeCee take over, and she will tell us a little bit more about herself, and we'll just get some time with her talking about story. Thanks so much, CeCee.
Well, first of all, I'm really privileged to continue to be invited by my good friend, Karen, to be a part of different things that she's doing. I get especially excited about generosity. I am, oh my gosh, how many years? I was ordained in 2004 to the Ministry of Word and Sacrament, and really felt from the time I was a child, the notion, the idea, the evidence, the embodiment of generosity, that it is part of my first nature to be generous and part of my family's first nature to be generous in all types of ways. And so when I do this work, I get excited. I tell people all the time, I love to ask for things, time, talent, and treasure, and to help others know how do I invite people into generosity? Not so much how can I get them to give more or do more or be more, but how can you invite them into more or deeper generosity? And I find that one of the ways that God has blessed us with is inviting them into the story, helping them to feel what the story is doing, saying, smelling like, tasting like, all of those things helps the hearer to be able to do that. So I'm going to give you some ways to do that, and then we're going to do some storytelling towards the end. So I hope you're ready. I hope Karen warned you. I always give classwork and homework. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the idea of feeling abundant. So I want you to just take your hands right now and put them about 3 inches apart. And I just want you to rotate them like I'm doing here. Hopefully you can see me okay. Just want you to rotate them in the same direction, like going towards your camera, computer, phone, whatever that is, about 3 inches apart. Feel that motion. Feel that rhythm. Some of us are coordinated, some of us aren't. For some of us, that's easy. For some of us, it's a challenge. We don't know what to look at, but you can feel it. You are aware. Now hold your hands like this. You are aware that God has blessed you with these 2 hands that you can feel, that you can see, and that you can use. So let's do it one more time. See what you feel. Rotating those hands. Do you feel like you're moving air? You're going a little faster now? Try it. Go a little faster.
What's that? French fries?
See how that's working. Now clap those hands. You hear that? What comes to mind when you hear the clap? Now stop. Those things, the way we feel, the way we touch, the way we move, all of those things, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, are ways to invite the hearer deeper into the story. So we're going to do a lot tactically today to see how we can do that. So we're going to learn some keys to transforming generosity through storytelling. A few keys to transforming generosity through storytelling. When you tell a story, if you can tell a story which you can feel the abundance, it helps the hearer to understand. If you can tell a story where the person that is hearing it can almost feel the abundance, that helps them to understand. Here's an easy example. One Christmas, my parents had us ask for what we wanted for Christmas. I knew it was a hard Christmas, so I oftentimes felt it was my role to take one for the team. So what I asked for was socks. My older sister, she asked for a Barbie, she asked for a dollhouse, she asked for a van for Barbie and all types of things. She asked for new clothes, bows for her hair. She asked for a host of things. And I only listed one thing, which was socks. When I came out on Christmas morning, we both had many packages. Every package I opened was 2 white plain tube socks. No stripe with the color, just white, plain tube socks. And I opened them again and again. And I think my parents knew who I was, that I would not show disappointment or anything. So every time I opened them, I said, socks. I said, socks. And so then they started, as I opened the gifts, they would just take the socks and put them in a big pile in front of me. And the socks got bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where the socks were between me and the Christmas tree, and all I could see was socks. My parents had bought hundreds of pairs of socks and put them in front of me. And I sat there trying my hardest to feel grateful, understanding that that's what I had asked for, and feeling foolish. And then after they watched me open all of those boxes, and my sister opened all of her wonderful toys, the skates and different things she didn't even ask for, and all of that, and they watched my face, I think they expected me to complain, but I didn't. And my dad finally broke the silence, and he just started laughing. And my dad has the best laugh. He laughs from the epitome, the pit of his belly, and the epitome of joy. And oftentimes when he starts to laugh, he doesn't make noise at first. He just is just like, because he just thinks it's so hilarious that the rest of us begin laughing, and it's infectious, and we don't even know what we're laughing about. And so he's starting to do that. We're all laughing. We're laughing so hard that tears are rolling out of our eyes. And me and my sister have no idea why. We just know that Daddy is laughing. And then he said, come here, girl. And so I went over to Daddy and I sat on his lap. He pulled me up on his lap and he said to me, do you think me and your mommy will actually get you socks for Christmas? And I said, it's okay. And so then after he said that, then my mom came out of the bedroom with all of these presents, with things that I wanted, but never would have asked. And they let me open those. And then we took all the socks and folded them, and we donated them to the Haitian refugees who were seeking housing in Lutheran communities all over the city. What a wonderful way to show me the audaciousness of God. Not only did I receive gifts, But part of the things that they showed me was that they weren't only generous to our family, but indeed for those who were in need, who had come to this country seeking refuge. And one of the things that they sorely needed was simply socks. The climate was different in many of the places where they were living, and they had not adjusted to that. And it was a thing that many of them never had in their life, never needed in their life. And my parents had showed our generosity with the socks, and also showed their generosity with their children. I love that. When I tell that story, it brings back memories of Christmases past. It brings back memories of time when my parents were together because they eventually got divorced. It brings back fun times, emotional times, generous times. And it reminds me of why I am such a generous giver, is because my parents, they didn't teach me, they showed me. They showed me the way of generosity. So that's a story of mine in which I can feel the abundance. And when I tell it, not only do I want you to imagine it or picture or see my physical excitement about it, but I imagine that if you couldn't see me at all, you would remember Christmases that you had, or birthdays that you had, or times where you were able to give a gift to someone else that reminded you of, and help to reconnect the hearer with that feeling of abundance, with that ability to give out of generosity, to give out of whatever resources or possibilities that you had to give to someone else. So that's the first key. Tell a story in which you can feel the abundance. And you might say, well, Pastor CeCee, I am not as dramatic as you are. I am not as happy. That doesn't matter. If you tell a story that made you feel the abundance, oftentimes, most of the time, the hearer will be able to feel the abundance as well. I was talking about the tactile ways, the ways that we ignite the senses so that the person who is listening is able to kind of drift into the story by remembering sounds or smells, or are able to see the image that you paint in front of them. You describe it, you share what about that story that they can imagine in their head, or through their noses, or through their memory. You want them to be able to have a visible picture of what you are sharing. You don't have to announce that I'm getting ready to tell a story. I want you to imagine this, but you say it in such a way that it engages them, that they become a part of your story, through you inviting them to imagine those sensory things that are happening. I'll tell another story. The first time that I can remember going to church on Christmas, the first time that I can remember being in God's house on Christmas Eve and going into the day of Christmas, I remember coming in and seeing all of the greenery strewn all over the worship space. I was probably 4 or 5. But I remember craning my neck back to try to see how far up that it reached to the ceiling. And I remember looking up front and seeing a very tall Christmas tree that looked so big that I thought I could climb it, but I knew if I did, my mother would get me. I remember watching it and thinking, oh, that is so pretty. I remember seeing the white lights that were strewn all around and smelling the pine coming in my nose, and just thought it was the best thing. I remember coming in and feeling excited, although I wasn't really sure what was happening. I wasn't sure what was going on around us. We had this big white gift in our hands. It had a huge curly ribbon on it, and it looked like it could contain anything in my 4 or 5-year-old imagination. I remember bringing it into church with us, and I remember wondering who it was for. My mother was a bit of a theatrical person, and she had created this skit to help people understand that Christmas was not for us, despite the fact that we got presents, that it was really about bringing a gift to the baby Jesus. And so in her imagination, she had created this huge white present that we brought into this space that was magical, with white lights and the smell of pine, and a huge Christmas tree that was adorned with all types of ornaments, not just Christmas. There were colorful ornaments. There were red and blue and purple. There were angels on it. There were icicles on it. There were all the things that we had at home as well, but they were up on this huge Christmas tree in the front of our worship space. And I remember when Mommy took the present from me and my sister, who had carried it in together like little elves or something. And I remember her taking it to the front and walking up to the Christmas tree and doing this long, dramatic, what seemed long, probably because I was 4 or 5, reading that kept me spellbound, that I just watched her. I was amazed that my mommy was doing this thing, and I tried to listen to hear the words that she was saying and why she was saying them. And I remember gleaning from it certain things about Jesus being born and bringing this gift, and her talking about bringing herself and offering herself to Jesus every year. And such beautiful words on such a beautiful night in such a beautiful space that smelled so wonderful, that became what I expected to smell at Christmas. So that when I smell pine needles, when I smell the smell of cinnamon, because someone I didn't know at the time was brewing some for us to be able to have some hot cider with cinnamon sticks after worship service, when I smell those smells, they remind me of that time and that idea of bringing a gift to Jesus, and that's what Christmas was about. So that when I had my own son, I refused to tell him about Santa Claus. Although I grew up with the notion, the idea of Santa Claus, I refused to tell him. I wanted him to know that this is Jesus's birthday, and that's what this is about. As soon as he got to kindergarten, that didn't work. The teachers used it to try to make children behave. But I was able to help him to understand the notion that Christmas is like a birthday party for Jesus. And we adorn the worship space. We light the candles. We light the Christmas tree. We hang the garland in celebration of the Christ child coming in. And because of that, we ought to feel so excited that we want to give and be generous and share God's love, to take what Jesus has given us, to say thank you by sharing God's love and giving God our offerings of time, talent, treasure, whatever we have, to be able to do that. So that's an example of a story that, again, invites the listener to remember and to imagine. Could you see the white present? Could you see the tinkling lights? Could you see the garland and the big old tree? Helping someone to hear that story helps it to resonate with them and to recognize the joy of generosity that is inside of them. When you share your story, be sure you include your why. We can tell a good story with no purpose. We can tell a good story that really is not exposing anything that we want to share, or for that person to learn or to get to know about us. We can do that. So when you're thinking about sharing stories as a part of inviting someone into generosity, be sure to include your why. Share what motivated you to be generous so that they can hear it, and that, again, may relate to a way that they understand life and things happening, so that they can understand how God is inviting them to generosity as well. So be sure to include your why. In the stories that I told, could you tell what I was trying to share with you? Could you understand those two Christmas stories, what they were about and what I was trying to show you? For me, my why is always thinking of those who aren't there, thinking of someone else. That's always my why, that I believe from the scriptures I read that God was preoccupied with taking care of all of our neighbors. And that for me to be the disciple that I hope to be, that I aspire to be, then that means that part of why I do what I do is so that others are cared for, so that others receive God's generosity in real and tangible and practical ways, in emotional and spiritual and healthy ways, that I want them to receive all of the holistic realm of possibilities of God's love and generosity. And so I do that. That's my why. Did you hear it when I shared my stories? Could you hear my why, what was motivating me to share that story, why that story excited me, why I wanted you to hear it, and how that invited you into the story? So I want to talk a little bit about scripture, and I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to put you all to work. Enough sitting back and listening to me share the story. I'm going to read to you Mark 12, verses 41 through 44. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, that's great. If you want to type on your computer or make notes on your phone, then that's fine. But what I want you to do is to listen to this story 3 times as I read these 4 verses. I want you to listen for what's happening in the story. I want you to listen for what you hear or imagine that you hear in the story, what you see in the story, and what you feel in the story. I'm going to read it 3 times. So listen for those things. Jot down notes as you can. And then I'm going to ask for some volunteers to tell the story. Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then Jesus called his disciples and said to them, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then Jesus called his disciples and said to them, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." I'll read it one more time. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then Jesus called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more and all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. So I want you to think about that story. I'm going to give you 5 whole minutes. And I've posted the text in the chat. I want you to use your God-given imagination. We all have it. How would you tell that story? What sounds? What feelings? What smells? What motions do you think would help the hearer to be invited into the story? Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. "90 seconds. I see those brains turning. To get in those last few edits. This isn't rhetorical. I really want to know, how did that make you feel for me to give you that challenge? How did that make you feel for me to give you that challenge? Go ahead, Jan, you're ready.
Well, I'm more ready to say how I felt than I am to present anything.
Uh-huh.
That's how I felt.
Mhm.
I am a good planner. I am spontaneous in my presentation if it's something that I truly have lived myself.
Yes.
This, however, made it much more difficult trying to, and what I did, I tried to put myself into that environment.
Okay.
Either as that woman or an observer or as Jesus, or I tried to find a little place that the message.
Good idea. And did you relate to any particular character?
Well, yeah, I related to the woman.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Jan.
Yeah.
See, that was easy.
Well, that part was easy.
Yes, and are you Leslie or Huli?
I'm Julie.
Julie, okay.
I guess I'm with Jan. I hated it. I felt like I was a kid back in school just given a pop quiz.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather plan out something, and I'd rather pick what I want to talk about.
Yes.
Rather than a text I've been given.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself hung up on 2 elements.
Okay.
Rather than a whole story.
Mm-hmm.
I pictured the rich people putting in dollar bills that were very quiet.
Okay.
In a pot. And
Mhm.
then I pictured the widow coming with her 2 copper coins, dropping them in, and they were very noisy.
Okay.
And I pictured Jesus having to, the word was called, his disciples to kind of call or holler over the crowd, because I pictured the crowd. And I pictured that crowd getting very quiet when they
Yes,
heard the clink of 2 coins.
that
And
was
I was just hung up on those differences and trying to figure out how would I put my interpretation of that story based on the sounds, the noise, and the things that made noise and things that didn't make noise.
I love that. I love that. Any others going to share how you unmuted, Georgia? You have something?
I guess I just, I tried to, again, listen for the sounds that, that it was a very busy, place. But then I went to the contrast of the rich and the poor widow, and more or less trying to help with how the people were dressed, that would signify how, how they could tell them apart. But then further taking it that, when she went, she had joy in her face and that she was happy and she knew, where the others just followed in line because it was their duty to give. So that was the one, for me, was just the, the contrast again of the 2 people, 2 different sets of people.
Okay, awesome.
Well, I'll tell y'all, and you won't be surprised if you've gotten to know me a little bit. I loved it, right? Because I could imagine. Now, I might be full of baloney. It may not be true. But what I loved was being able to think about, Jesus came in and he sat down on a colorful rug, right? Not just sat down, but on a colorful rug. And I was one in the crowd. And it was a really large crowd, like maybe hundreds. I'm making it up, friends, right? But then also I really do agree with all of us that talked about the sounds. So, Julie and Georgia and everything. So even in that second telling, before CeCee got to the third, what was really important to me is the 2 copper coins. So we got a sense of what they look like, tiny copper coins. But that thing of imagining that when she dropped them, they made a ding. So I kind of went down that road also, but I had fun also, Georgia, talking about many rich people with great robes bedecked in color and jewels, is what I said. Where the widow was in a simple tan robe, right? Not gray or black, I know it should be, but I was thinking more what really might be reality in a dusty country. So in other words, I had fun imagining what this story could be if I had been there. So I just thank CeCee for that opportunity to be creative, whether it's true or not.
Yes. All of you have been creative. I mean, even Jan imagined herself as a character in the story. I could tell that whether you were just trying to please me, your brain went there. Your brain went there. Others.
May I add just a question here? An observation and a question. So far, we've had a few folks able to share. Hopefully everybody will be able to do this piece of it. Just sharing our process and the details that we would kind of intuitively include, because my story changed every time I heard something from somebody else.
Yes.
Oh, yes, that would fit with this and that. And so I found that experience an encouraging experience of perhaps remembering to have conversations with somebody prior to making this kind of a presentation or something. I found that just really, really helpful. So I hope that everybody can do this piece of it,
Yes.
even if we don't all get to share an actual final story.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you, Jan. Others, you ready, Colleen?
I suppose, yeah, sure. So I'm kind of a backwards thinker. I'd like to know where the whole picture and then fill in the pieces,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little opposite of what I was hearing from others. So I was imagining, where is the love in this story, right? Where is Christ's love for the people? And where's the teaching moment in the story? Not the shame on you teaching moment, but the we are in this together in love teaching moment. So I too was thinking of the coins dropping, but what I heard was the light patter, like pitter patter of rain, maybe rain on a roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the imagery that I saw was almost chaos of celebration. All these people coming together in almost like rooster peacock kind of walking with all of their treasures and their stuff, you know, and laughing and joy filled. And honestly, I saw the disciples caught up in that.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus had sat down, and, you know, the assumption in my mind was that they all came together.
Okay.
But the disciples got caught up in all of that. And Jesus called them back, you know, kind of that teaching moment of careful where you let your heart wander, be careful where you let your eyes go.
Yeah.
You know, be careful where you're going to let your feet take you, kind of a thing. And let's refocus.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's where I had come. If I were telling this story,
Yes.
you know, I would paint the picture. I'd paint the picture of this busy street and this crowd of people and these chests wide open called a treasury. And people are coming with all their bags, and they're dropping their bag of this into this chest for that thing, and this bag into this other chest for this other thing. And, you know, the more abundance they had, the more bags they could drop into each of these, more than a dozen chests. And on the edge, on the margin, in the periphery, is this woman who isn't part of the laughing, isn't part of the jolly or the celebration, who walks up invisible almost, and she just drops her 2 coins into the one chest, right? And Jesus says, did you see her? Did you see her?
Awesome. Good. That was wonderful, Colleen. I don't remember what you said your process was, but it seemed like it came out with something that helped, again, to share creativity. Others want to share. Catherine, my colleague, my good friend. What was your process? How did it feel when I gave that assignment?
Yeah, I was excited because I love, I don't know if that's true, but I've always heard that called the African method, African Bible study method. Is that real? I don't know. Where you listen to it 3 times.
Oh no, that's go ahead. I'll think of the name of it.
It has a Latin name, doesn't it? Anyway,
Lectio Divina, isn't it?
Lectio Divina.
Yes, thank you.
Way long time ago at Fall Convo, somebody did that with us and called it the African Bible study method. Okay. Anywho,
It is now.
It is something. It was for somebody. I always appreciate it because I always appreciate hearing something different each time. And that is just consistently true. It was just a gift of scripture, I think. And for me, I was certainly
I was just following directions, CeCee, because I was the first time through looking at, thinking about sounds or what I saw, and then second time through thinking about what I was hearing. And then, and it's interesting though, and I can't remember if it was Georgia or Julie, but somebody was saying, maybe Georgia, you said something about the woman coming with joy. And for me, when I started thinking about feelings, interestingly, the woman for me was coming with shame. She was coming feeling ashamed of her, maybe herself, her dress, her little gift, her small amount. And then the declaration of Jesus, which I'm not sure, in my story, I'm not sure that she even heard, which that's kind of a shame because she should hear it. But I was imagining that Jesus was, that the disciples and maybe even the rich folk who were there were hearing what Jesus had to say, which was lifting her up from her shame.
How about Charlotte?
I'm not sure I understood the assignment. I didn't hate it, but I'm not sure I understood the assignment accurately. But I just kept watching Jesus. And I'm just impressed that this story of this, and maybe she was the only woman as well, the gender perhaps also there in the lineup, that he turned the tables again of society to the poor, took notice, paid attention to what was going on, took notice. I hope that their eyes met or something, because I hope so. I hope she heard them, and I hope their eyes met, because she was trusting God for her next meal, and he was there. And I'm sure her needs were met, but she had so much trust, and that impressed him. And the word might, referring to the coin, Georgia and I know about a project in Tanzania where widows who don't inherit anything started a craft co-op, and they call it Widows MIGHT.
Nice.
That they have become self-supporting from it. So that even that word is meaningful. Widows might, not just a little, but strong
Yes.
faith.
Awesome. Thank
So
you.
I don't know if that's what you wanted.
It was exactly what I wanted, Charlotte, because it was whatever came out of it. It didn't.
Right.
It was not preconceived. Jocelyn, longtime friend as well.
Well, what I was thinking about is that when I use scripture with a story embedded in it, I usually, like you did, I usually read the scripture once, because I have become aware that there are people who haven't heard this scripture before. And then I usually have someone else read it a second time. And then the third time, I usually read it with just phrases. I've picked out, phrases and began to ask people about how they see themselves in the story. And for this one, I was imagining being in the crowd and not being among one of the richest people, but not being the widow. I felt like I'm always somewhere in the middle. I'm never on the best end. I'm never on the worst end. As far as I can tell, I'm always somewhere in the middle. And being in the middle, I would have had some resources to contribute, not as much as maybe the person next to me or whatever, but certainly more than the widow had. And just trying to imagine those kinds of feelings that come up, even for the ones who are on the rich end and those who are on the poor end. And of course, all of us in the middle, because there's a lot of us in the middle. So that was kind of my take on it. Where was I? When we talk to people about tithing, and this is certainly a great story for that, giving as you are able, you know, and if you don't have 10%, maybe you only have 4% or 3% or 1%, or maybe you have 12%, you know, so it's that kind of thought process that goes through my head with these stories.
Thank you. More creativity. I love it. Nick?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, you know, so my brain immediately went to back to seminary, actually, because my concentration was New Testament and my master's thesis was on the Gospel of Mark. And I was thinking a lot about how the stories that we read in Scripture came from an oral tradition, and I actually tried to put myself in the shoes of the story, the person trying to tell this, to retell this story in the time that it was being given, you know, not written down, but being told, and what details might have been different, and what are some of the ways that the person telling the story might have said one thing or another, and then, you know, what we ended up with that got written down. So that's where my head went.
Yep. Very scholarly. Thank you, Nick. Cindy?
This scared me as well, because I tend to be a person that would write a story and then I'd edit it, I'd sleep on it, and I'd edit it the next day because something developed. But I'm so impressed by what all of you said. I focused on the scene, and I looked a lot at the stature of the people. And when the rich people came in, imagine them milling about and chatting as they do, and sort of the wind and the sand and the air as well, and being maybe a bit smug about what they were doing. And I too felt that the widow, I saw her as a person who came in very humbly and very quietly, and wondered, did the crowd, did the rich people or the others look down upon her? And I see her sort of crouched over in a beige dress. But the other person I focused on was Jesus. And I thought, was he standing on the side and looking and just thinking, this is a really good teaching moment, and I need to bring the disciples together to do that. So that's basically how I looked at it.
Good. There are no wrong answers. There are none. There are some historical beliefs as far as when we talk about a treasury in Scripture. It is more of a device than what we use these days. So it's not just a storage chest, but it was sculptured in order to make sound. And in that time, the money was coins. So there was no rustling. You know how if we're in church, oftentimes, unless it's a noisy offering, and then we want to make a lot of noise. If we have change, we try to enter it into the offering plate quietly. And so one of the things that I think Jesus was highlighting was, yeah, I imagine like all of you did, that there was this crowd noise and all of that. But there also was this triumphant noise when the rich people dropped in their many coins. And that there was this cacophony that made when the widow's mite fall sound differently. But I don't think anybody really noticed any of it because of all the noise that was going. But the rich people were trying to get noticed in my imagination. I want to share this picture that I found that one artist imagines that this scene looks like. It doesn't mean that it's historically right. Nick probably can tell us what is most likely what it really looked like. But I just love this image as far as how it matches kind of what my imagination saw. And someone said that she had a look of joy. And to me, this actress has a look of determination, that nothing's going to keep her away from her generosity, because it's such a core part of who she is in this particular artist's design. And so there's no wrong answer. And I thought all of yours was really good. And the reason I invited you to do that was because I wanted you, one, to see that God made you creative, whether you were aware of it or not. And I also wanted you to be a little scared if you were. I wanted you to feel that intimidation. And then I wanted to invite you into understanding that most of the time when you tell a story and you're doing it for the sake of generosity, it's a story about a generosity you've experienced. So it's going to be a whole lot easier than that. So I've given you the mountain, and now it will seem far easier. So we're going to try again with stories. And you're like, you made me work on that story. You're not going to listen to it, woman. We're going to try again with stories, except for this time, I'm going to invite you to think about a time where you experienced, where you exhibited, or where you felt generosity in your worshiping community. Think about a story where you experienced, exhibited, where you were the recipient of generosity in your worshiping community. That doesn't mean during a worship service, but with the people of faith where you consider to be those who God has called you to be in mission and ministry with. It can be anything. It can be the neighbor down the street who was skateboarding and came by and asked for a popsicle. It can be someone who needed help with utilities. It could be somebody that needed a car jumped. It could be a man who walked in off the street during worship and asked for help. It could be an offering you took up for world hunger. It could be the way that you support the local shelter. Think of a time of generosity, a way of generosity that you have been a part of. And then take another 5 minutes to begin to write the story so that I either hear it, feel it, taste it, that it's a tangible story. So think about a time. If you say, well, my community is so stingy, I can't think of nothing to go to your own personal story and find something within your own story that you experienced where someone was generous to you or not. I'm hoping it's a faith community, but if not, go to your own story where you experienced it or you were able to extend it. And the last thing I'll say before I'm quiet so that you can have that time to plan your story. Most of us are more comfortable being the giver than the receiver. If there are no receivers, then we givers will be miserable. So I challenge you to be open to receiving as easy as it feels to give. To take 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask you again. Hopefully I'll get nicer responses. How was that?
Too short.
Is that too short? Yeah.
It seemed much easier.
Okay.
We got to pick, I think, our own topic.
Mhm. Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
tell you a secret, Georgia. If I had you do that first, you would have been just as mad at me.
Yeah.
But isn't it true, you guys, as mission interpreters and storytellers, sometimes we tell our own stories, but sometimes we tell a ministry story.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we try to share Sophia and make it come to life, right? And that's not our own story. Now, I think of Sydney. We oftentimes have time to prep ourselves for that and write it and edit it and write it and edit it. Or the way I did, right? See all those places I just crossed off in huge things because I was like, no, that's not what I meant. So.
Yep, that's all true. The things that I want you to hear are important. Is to invite the hearer into the story and to make sure you're pointing to your why. Because that's what you want to convey with them, not so that your why will convince them, but so they can connect with their own why. And they will understand that. And oftentimes what I find when you tell a story in that way, somebody else will have a story. Yeah, Jocelyn probably knows what I mean. If you testify, somebody else will want to testify because your testifying has caused them to remember what God did for them. And so it is important that we understand that and recognize that and share it with others, help others, invite them to be able to be a part of that sharing. And they may be intimidated at first, but it's important. I had you tell 2 different stories, 2 different ways. It is important to practice storytelling, to practice doing it, to do it in such a way that it becomes in a way in your heart and in your mind. And so that you recognize this wonderful thing that God has created, that has called us all to do, which is to be witnesses of God's goodness. And so this is being able to be a witness and sharing it in such a way, again, that invites the hearer into the story. So I just want to hit a few more slides to wrap things up, and then I'll see if you have any questions. I know that Cindy is ready for me. Here we go. I have too many windows open. You know how that is. So the power of the witness touches the heart of the believer. We just have to look at Jesus as a storyteller. What does Jesus want his disciples to understand? In the story that we told about the widow's mite, where Jesus calls his disciples to look at what's in front of them, the people watching, the exposition of what's transpiring right in front of them. But also, what would Jesus want his disciples to understand about your story or the story of the ministry site? As you tell your story of generosity, what do you want your hearers to understand? What is it that you hope to convey, hope to share, hope to help them to feel, to see, to understand? And be sure that you are clear in articulating the why. Your why connects to their why and helps to invite them to be generous, to be in the understanding that God has blessed us with all of this. It's not mine to decide how it's distributed. It belongs to God. And I joyfully get to tell the story of how God continues to bless us. What questions do you have? So pop quiz. I gave you some keys to telling stories. What are they?
Shout them out, friends.
Say that again.
I just said shout them out, friends.
Oh, okay.
Don't be shy.
I thought you said tell them among friends. I said, oh no, that wasn't a key, but that's a good one. Cindy, go ahead.
Oh yeah, the one that really struck me was use sounds, images, smells, etc. to paint the picture for the hearer.
Yes.
Yeah, same here, the tactile aspects.
Yep, that's one of the important keys. So I gave you two others.
Why?
The why.
Why?
Is huge. If you think you're doing the why so that they will support buying a new boiler, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Generosity is a lifestyle. It's not a fall campaign. It's a different way of being, and helping people to understand that and to celebrate it and to experience it helps to have that joy that someone imagined on the widow's face, in spite of adversity, in spite of situations. I grew up in a home where my dad worked for AT&T, and then when my parents divorced, my mother decided that she needed to take care of us on her own. For whatever reason, her mother had done that, but her mother was a widow. So it was very different. But for her understanding, it was her job. So we lived very modestly. She started working for Goodwill after my father left because he wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom. So once he left, and she started working at Goodwill, my sisters and my first cousins who lived with us during that time, two first cousins that lived with us during that time, we still talk fondly about our Goodwill Christmases. They were so good. And if you, Lacoste, we had Lacoste shirts, we had Gloria Vanderbilt, and just different things that came from there. And it was just a good time to be family. We did not realize that we were missing out on anything, because we felt like, that we had so much, and we did have so much. So those are two of them. What's the third one?
Invite
we talked
the
about
hearer
sounds.
into the story.
Invite the hearer into the story is very important. Yes. That's kind of the overarching, and the way you do that are through these things, but that was a wonderful guess. So we talked about sounds, images, smells. What sensory are we missing when we say that? We started with it.
Feel the abundance.
Feel the abundance. Thank you, Julie. Feel the abundance. Know that it's tangible. Oftentimes, I think we, especially as Lutherans, get pretty heady. And so we imagine generosity as being just a mental state of being, or maybe sometimes emotions or something like that. But we don't really think about it being a tangible presence of God. And so know that it feels different when you're in an environment that's generous, when you're with a person that's generous. It feels different. The air is different. And that the expectation is to understand that that is contagious, that we can help others to feel that, to see that, to know that, to have something that's good and wonder, well, how can I get that for myself? And we are inviting them to do that and showing them how to do that. All right, so let me try again. Let me pick on somebody who didn't answer that one. Ken, do you know one of the three things that are the keys to telling a good story for the sake of helping invite someone into generosity?
But I'm a late arrival here. So.
You are. That's why I picked it, you Ken, because we missed you. We're so glad you're here now.
But I'm not sure where it fits in, I guess.
You want to take a guess? There are no wrong answers. God's grace is abundant.
Yeah.
Oh, what a clue.
Yeah, give them a clue. Give them a clue,
Yeah,
Julie.
sharing is grace, huh?
Yeah, God's grace is abundant.
Yeah.
Abundance.
Yeah, so we want you to feel the abundance, Ken. that you actually feel it. I remember as a child putting on my mother's rabbit fur coat, which wasn't taboo at that time. But I felt luxurious. That the generosity of God should make us feel that we are in a wealth that has nothing to do with material possessions and everything to do with God's abundance. Thank you, Ken. I'm gonna leave you alone. Ken's like, please get off of me, CeCee, please. Okay, so the pop quiz is still going. The other two things that we had, what were one of the other two things? Not Julie, she's already given us one. You got one, Georgia?
Just looking back at some of the notes that I took, and I guess I didn't take very good ones, but I have written down after the why, you know, thinking of someone else, but then how. The why is how we get to how God takes care of others in many ways. That's what I had written down.
Okay.
And then I went right into the story of the widow's mite. I don't know if I have it.
You are fine. You got what you need.
I can say, CeCee, I know we've already talked about this piece, but the one thing that I just love that we've talked about today that I have not thought about in storytelling so much is smell, right? I think in stories we talk about colors sometimes so you can get a sense of visual. Sometimes we talk about noise. You know, the Psalms are so good at doing that, right? But that smell piece is just one that's really fun, I think, for us to play with in the future.
Well, Karen, the story you told us definitely had a smell element.
I was working on it. I was working on including smell as well as what it looked like and all of that. So yeah, that was just a fun one to think about.
Is that the story you told 1-to-1 that the rest of us missed out on? It was smelly. Okay.
It was French fries.
That's so wrong. So those are the three that are there, and I'm going to send Karen the PowerPoint, so you will have those in your notes. I don't want you to try to refer to your notes. I want you to take away what you gleaned from this by your experience and let that help you tell the story. That's more important than being to the letter of those keys. It's taking away, okay, this is the posture, the act, the way of storytelling that can be helpful. So as we wrap up, are there any questions left? Yes, Ken.
Are there any changes in the ways you tell stories given the, I guess, the difficulty in connecting right now in person? And
I think so. I think when you're the storyteller, you have to find the mode that works for the time. And so if social distance is a part of that, then what would storytelling look like? How would that change? Something that you might have told a friend in person, you're going to tell in a phone call. Phone call storytelling is pretty good because that gives that person imagination to be able to run wild without you being able to see their facial expressions. So it's not going to intimidate you in your storytelling, and then they don't have to keep a game face in case you say something that takes them to a place they didn't expect to. So we have to find ways to do that. I love things that are written, but storytelling for me is most effective when it's oral, where they can hear the change in your voice and hear the excitement and hear when you're kind of getting serious and when it's kind of fun, when it's joyful and all of those things. So in this season, as we come back, then that's something to think about. If you are a part of the ministry team for your congregation, maybe a recorded story might be helpful. If you are still doing things where people are social distance, and having something that can be posted or shared during worship might be a way to do that.
I appreciate that question, Ken. And for me, I know it's harder for me as a storyteller in the world of masks. In that one, as you know, both CeCee and I are pretty expressive. You can't miss it, right? And so sometimes that's part of our story, but when you have a mask on, it's harder to see that. but it's really hard for me as a storyteller. I love to see the expression of the people that are hearing the story. And I love to see them change. And sometimes that's just harder to see when we're all masked, and we're back to masking indoors nowadays just because of some things going on. So it's a really interesting thing to think about.
I've learned to watch people's eyes much more with, with the mask on, where before you would, you could usually tell the expression here, but, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Especially the little kids.
It is. I love little kids with the stories.
As well as posture, I think, Georgia, right? If someone, that helps a little bit to get a sense of how they're hearing. So, well, it is 8:32. Can you all just take a moment with me and thank CeCee? Oh, this was just so great. Thank you.
It was
so
wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
And what I love about it is CeCee and I both have really deep passions for generosity, but that's what mission interpretation is about, right? It's about helping our people understand the ministries and the faith stories that are embedded in our individual lives, our congregational lives, our synod lives, and our church-wide lives. And we are inviting them to be generous, either by being generous with their time, their gifts, their money, or at least their engagement. So this has been really fun to think about it, especially in feeling abundance, right? So thanks again, everyone. Before we wrap up, I just want to show you one thing, and then we will go from there. Of course, now I can't figure out where it is. Here it is. I want to let you know that we are, I hope you can see, we are set to get together, if you are all safe and comfortable enough, September 16th through the 18th. And I want to thank CeCee, as well as Catherine, as well as Danielle Denise, who's not with us tonight, because they will be helping to host us. We are getting together for what we're calling Dwelling in Story with each other. And it will be starting on a Friday night, September 16th. We will gather Friday night at a hotel and do some personal faith story work. And then on Saturday, we will go to Augsburg Lutheran and as well the Dwelling. They're kind of across the street. They're on the same campus, but two different, a historical church and then a new start. But really our time together is going to be spending time sharing faith stories, finding blessings and hearing stories, practicing being faithful stewards of stories, and learning from and about the North Carolina Synod ministries that we can connect with. I will be sending out this flyer as well as posting it, but registration is open. It's early, it's not till September, but it's open. And the way that we're doing it is all the costs of the conference are covered, as well as all of the meals Friday night and all day Saturday. And then as well, hotel will be covered. We are asking anyone who comes to do their own transportation, just because some people might drive, some people might fly. But the cost of transportation has changed substantially recently, flying. So if that's an issue, you just need to get a hold of me and we will figure out ways to try to make that happen. So I hope that you all here might find a way to take a little time. It's beautiful in North Carolina in September. And you will get to be with CeCee and Catherine and Danielle and maybe even Bishop Smith, as well as many, many others, to spend time sitting in stories. So I hope that you'll consider that. We'll get that out to you soon. Okay? Thank you, everybody. I love what Colleen said. What a great way to finish my day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Night.